Welcome back. You're listening to the Cindy Laverty Show. Thanks for staying with us today. My guest is Matt Walker, and we're talking about his book, Adventure in Everything. And you can find the book and Matt at adventureineverything.com. Right? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, great.
Adventureineverything.com. Yeah, and if you want to download the first chapter and say, hey, yeah, I like this stuff, like this resonates with me, or it's not for me, either way, you can download the first chapter. It'll be sent off to you. And then if you like it, you can head over to Amazon and pick up a copy.
Okay, perfect. Glad to know where we can all get it. I have my copy, and I'm not sharing it.
Don't share it.
I'm not sharing it. It's all underlined and written in anyway. Matt, before I went to break, I wanted to, I mentioned that we were going to talk about caregivers. I mean, we have 67 million family caregivers in America today. And 67 million providing $450 billion a year in free care and services for a loved one with no formal training. And so they wonder why they're so overwhelmed and why, life is not a big adventure to them. So you told me when we talked before the show that you often address this issue. So what do you say to family caregivers?
Right. So oftentimes I'll hear, I'll present this information, present this idea of adventure, and someone will invariably raise their hand and say, I'm stuck with some serious responsibilities that are not adventurous, not enjoyable. Right. I'm exhausted and fatigued, and
I'm mad.
I'm angry.
And I'm mad.
And yeah, your ideas are great, but they're not for me.
Right.
And what I turn that a little bit by pointing out that, like I mentioned earlier, values and actions.
Yes.
That's what we're going for. And caregiving, then sometimes we have these responsibilities, and that's the way it is. We have children we need to support, we have siblings, we have parents, whatever it is. We can't just leave our jobs and go on the road and travel the world. So we have to acknowledge those responsibilities, and caregiving is a substantial, significant responsibility.
Yes.
So I look at it twofold. One, the extreme importance for self-care along the way.
Oh, you and I are like symbiotic thinkers.
So you're tempering it, so you're taking care of yourself as much as you can along the way, so you don't just build up to this point of fatigue. But the other point is really acknowledging values and actions. And the way that comes forward in caregiving is re-energizing how we are present with those that we are giving care to.
Right.
So we're not just going through the motions, but we are really seeing that individual each day from the perspective of the care that they need, as opposed to kind of putting blinders on and just going through the motions. And so with the values, it may be something to the extent of, today I'm going to have the intention of honoring this person by really wanting to hear them and listen to their stories and listen to their history.
Right. I think sometimes you don't have to spend so much time taking care of as you do just spend time being there with.
Right. Being present to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a shift in experience for you and that person when you do choose to be present with them as opposed to taking care of them.
Right.
They sense it. You walk away at the end of the day or the end of the night, however it may be, not as fatigued, not as tired, because you're engaging with them as a human being, not as a problem to be solved or as a responsibility that you have to attend to, but it's a choice.
And caregiving also forces us, if we're going to do it right, to step out of our comfort zone and ask for help and set some boundaries. It makes us, I think one of the reasons there's such huge fatigue in it is because it forces people to really look at their lives differently.
Right. And you're right about also being able to kind of seek that support and care from others along the way.
Right.
Like you mentioned earlier, we're not islands just going through our experiences by ourselves, but we really are, we're part of larger communities, and so we need to tap into that and take the risk to ask for that type of support.
Yes. Okay, so I have another question I want to ask you. Do you...
Scared now.
You should be. Do you think we use perfectionism to avoid uncertain outcomes?
To avoid uncertain outcome? I think we use perfectionism to, I'm not sure about the uncertain outcome right off the top of my head, but I do think we use perfectionism as an excuse to not engage.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know that in my business sometimes, like if I have to do a webinar, I don't do it because it has to be perfect or I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really a fear thing for me, like, oh, what if I don't do it perfectly? What'll somebody... I think I use it as an excuse sometimes. I'm going to admit that.
So, the question is, if you think about a child and you think about this idea of beginner's mind, of seeing things in a new light, seeing things as if you've never seen them before, think about a child riding a bike.
Yeah.
The expectation is not that they're going to hop on the bike and be able to ride perfectly right from the get-go.
No, you just want to avoid riding into rose bushes.
Right. The first webinar you do is going to be kind of messy because you're not a professional webinar provider.
Oh, I just don't want it to be.
But so you have to learn as you go. So you stack the odds in your favor as much as you can.
Yeah.
But you also acknowledge that at some point you're going to have to take that risk and take that step forward. And so much like we were talking about earlier about looking back on our lives and looking at the history of that our narrative can be shifted and changed, that there are times in your life when you've taken that risk without being completely prepared.
Yes.
As a result, and you've performed, and sometimes it's gone well and sometimes it hasn't. But it's about looking at, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? What's the perceived risk versus the actual risk? And what's the danger?
Right.
What's the risk?
Right.
And I think you'll find that oftentimes it supports your success.
And showing up and being human. Okay, stay with us. You're listening to Cindy Laverty Show. I'll be right back.